Good afternoon and welcome back to the enclosure. I have promised you some electrical tidbits that I've picked up over time, little tricks and stuff and information that I've gathered. I am going to skip that. I'm just showing you that I have been working. I have got the vast majority of the 15 and 20 amp circuits complete. I think I've got 3 more to do: the garage, the cold room under the garage, and an exterior outlet for the neighbors when I'm on generator. Anyway, I can tell you that the inspector has tentatively approved this concept. I've sent him an emailed photo, and as you can see, I've got cables going in behind that I completely filled up that gap, and then now I'm doing a second layer. We'll see whether or not when it's all done I'm going to have some sort of protection over this because it's so close to the drywall. I don't think so, because it's not where the drywall is attached, and I actually plan on having a large cabinet with a door here anyway so that I can access this in the future. Anyway, last week I was reminded that I am just a homeowner. I am not a licensed builder, I'm not a licensed electrician, I'm not a licensed plumber, and sometimes I make mistakes, or sometimes I'm just ignorant of what the correct way to do something is. So I called for my plumbing inspection, and fortunately I had a very understanding inspector. He was very frustrated, I guess is the best term, but he didn't get mad and he didn't get mean. So that was very, very nice. So the first thing, when you go for your plumbing rough-in inspection, you need to have your system pressurized to, he says 140, and then later on he confirmed by email it can be 120 to 140. So you need a way to pressurize your system up to 120 to 140. So before, that stub was just a stub. It didn't have the union and the hose connector to it. It was for a potential high pressure supply to the garage, or possibly to interior fire suppression sprinklers. Both of those got abandoned. The sprinklers just weren't worth it and too expensive. And the garage high pressure was replaced with an exterior high pressure that I have on the driveway. So fortunately, my district pressure is high enough for this test. My district pressure is about 142 psi. So the first thing I had to do was put basically a connection to this high pressure. But I was rushing to do that during the inspection so that I could pump up the pressure while he was here. And he said, "Don't worry, there's other things that are wrong. I'm going to have to come back anyway." And so, and then he said a little comment. He says, "And you should look, because you could possibly wreck your pressure relief or pressure reducing valve, or regulating valve, whichever you want to call it, reducing or regulating." And indeed, if I had pumped 140 psi back to the reducing valve, I would have popped a relief valve in the reducing valve and it would have been toast. So I also had to install this valve so that between the supply main and this, I could isolate the pressure regulating valve. And then that created, with the hose, a loop over to the high pressure, so now I can create a high pressure test. And I have run it at 140 for the required half hour, and no problems. So I shouldn't have any problems during the inspection. So then the next thing was, and I actually don't know why he had problems, but he was looking at this, the copper is the pressure and temperature relief valve output, and the PEX is the condensate output. And it goes into a standpipe, into a trap, and then over into the vent pipe of the sanitation sump in the basement. And he said, oh, well, none of this is going to do. And so this is when things started to get a little bit heated. I had actually emailed the master plumbing inspector ahead of time and said, look, I'm having to put the hot water tank in a different location than originally planned. I'm planning on putting it into a standpipe, into a trap, into the vent. Is that acceptable to you? And then I was just going to allow the drip tray to drip onto the floor, and over here I have what will be a floor drain, and it all slopes quite well to this floor drain. And he said fine. So I told this to the inspector, and he just said fine, whatever, kind of thing. I'm kind of wasting my time. So he's frustrated, and rightly so. Somebody has said something different than what he said. And the problem is, this project's gone on so long. My original inspector, who's awesome, he's getting closer to retirement, and he's doing more interior office management work now, as opposed to site inspections. So now another person's come on track, and I'm partway through the build, and some stuff's been passed off and some stuff hasn't. And he's a little bit frustrated because he sees things that he would have wanted done differently that the first inspector has basically accepted. And I believe the first inspector is the boss of all the other inspectors. So it got interesting. Now, there's an issue that I'll talk about in a sec that was the underlying reason for the vast majority of his frustration, which I'll talk about in a sec. But basically what we've got the cold water coming off a T, and down we've got another T here that goes over to a mixing valve. That way you can bring the temperature to the taps to 120 so it doesn't scald, but you can still keep the tank at 140 so that you don't have bacteria growth, which is a code requirement in my area and in many areas. So I've got the cold coming into the mixing valve, and what basically happens is there's I think it's a bimetal strip in here somehow that opens the cold into the flow of hot water if it's higher than the desired temperature. And I'm going to have a temperature gauge on here somewhere. I have a surface one that I'll just put on later on, or I'll just go to a tap and run it until I know I'm set at 120. The cold continues down, and then we go into the expansion tank. Now, and I've got isolations on both sides so that I can take the expansion tank off without draining the system, which I'm actually going to have to do because there's a part in here that's called a mixing vein that actually fell out, and nobody knew what it was for. And when I was reading the manual during some scanning of office work, I saw that there was this mixing valve in here. It's just a tiny little plastic thing. So anyway, expansion tanks are required when there is a backflow preventer or some sort of blockage that prevents water going back to district. So in my case, this PRV valve actually does have, I talked about earlier, this relief valve that'll blow. But if somebody installed a different model of pressure regulating valve that didn't have that and prevented backflow, you could basically explode your piping when the hot water tank heated up. And these are sized based on the volume of water in the hot water tank, not any piping, just the volume of hot water in the tank, which is what is changing, expanding. So then we come up and we go to a vacuum valve. The vacuum valve has to be higher than the top flood rim of the hot water tank. And actually, I could have probably put it down here somewhere, because the hot water tank actually ends here, and the rest of this is all the heat pump. Anyway, he looked at that very closely, and I think he was a little bit concerned that it was blocked, and then was satisfied that it wasn't. The vacuum relief valve is there because these tanks do not handle any type of negative pressure. They will implode. And if you go on the internet, you can see various tanks imploding under vacuum if they're not designed for it. You just search for vacuum imploding tanks. They're good for pressure, but they're not good if there's a suction. And you can get a suction if the district is working on their lines and then undoes one of them, and there's a downhill flow, and it's actually sucking water out of your line. And you can then get suction coming through your line into your system. So what this does is, under pressure, there's a cap that pushes up and seals it. But under suction, this cap comes down and allows air to be admitted into here. And in fact, you could hear that while you were filling the system. You could hear it draining out the air of the system. Then we come down and basically we go into the hot water tank with the cold. Now, code requires a flexible connection. I wanted full port hose. Any of the stuff that I saw, well, the stuff that is at the wholesaler is all shark bite, and it's meant to just be a stub-on onto a PEX B pipe, and they don't have, funny enough, female international pipe thread and by female pipe thread. So there wasn't a good option without ordering something in. And then what they were willing to order in had a very small diameter inside pipe. And I've worked pretty hard on this system to reduce any type of flow restrictions all the way up to the shower. I showed you that earlier. So I ended up making it just out of PEX. PEX is rated for the hot water that comes out of here, and the manufacturer of both the tank and the PEX allow it to be used in this facility. And the rule is you just have to have some form of union disconnect, which is what I've done. Then we go to the outflow, which is here, and we come over and we're back to the mixing valve and out to the system. The pressure and temperature relief valve, it has to basically go downhill, and you can only have 2 elbows. And then it goes into the standpipe. Now normally this goes down really close to the floor where a floor drain is, and then just empties out to the floor, which I've never really liked. If it blows, you're spraying water everywhere. And I'll find out later and hopefully post it what the actual approved method that the inspector wanted to see. Then, because this is a heat pump, it's going to create condensate. And condensate's very corrosive, so it has to be drained away. It's obviously not hot. It's just a cold acidic acid. And the manufacturer has recommended that there is a unscrewable cap at the top. Because it's condensate that's just dribbling, you do get bacterial growth and like algae almost that builds up, and it can actually block the line. So you have a cap at the top so that you can run a snake down and clean it out, or even like a high pressure water jet. So that's where I'm at with the hot water tank. And like I said, I'll find out what the inspector was upset about later on this standpipe arrangement. So we got past that, and I'm at this point, I'm rushing around trying to find fittings to connect the the district pressure so that I can boost up the test pressure, and he's going through the house. So we get to later on, he's talking about, and I may as well talk about it now. He's talking about the fact that all of my pipes are already insulated. I used, it's not this cheap foam stuff, it's elastomeric, and I used stuff that didn't have a seam on it because it's a better quality and you get a better installed installation. But that means he can't see any of the pipe. And so he was not happy about that. Sorry folks, this part of the video was taped quite a bit after the initial part. My battery on the video camera had died and ended up corrupting the last 3 or 4 files. That's what you get when you buy a bargain basement little high-def camera. But anyway, I was just saying that the inspector was quite unhappy that the pipes had been insulated. And the reason is because it prevents him from verifying a lot of things. The joints, how well the joints are done, the material of the pipe, and more importantly the size of the pipe, so that he can determine I have the right sizing going to each fixture. But in reality, you can, and I'm sure he could, you can tell pretty quickly just by looking at the size of the insulation what size of pipe it is. Here we've got 1/2 inch, and if you look up here, we've got 3/4 inch. So you can see that it's dramatically a different size. And here you can see a T where you've got the 3/4 to 1/2. So you can tell. But needless to say, he was aggravated and or frustrated and upset, and he had said that if I had been a contractor, he would have made me rip this all off, and that it was up to me to ensure that the pipes were sized appropriately, and if they weren't, don't come back to the district if there's a problem. Fair enough. In reality though, it would have been fairly difficult to insulate these pipes properly. So in other words, to make sure that they were airtight and there would be no condensation, which is going to be really important on the mechanical, the HVAC side of things, by installing the pipe and mounting it with the clips, the clip hangers first, and then trying to insulate over top of that. I did a little bit of that with the non-potable, which you can see here, and it's a lot of work to try and seal around the clip, where something like this, you can see it's pretty easy. I used it's actually a piece of plastic gutter that I used to transfer the loads from the strap so that they didn't dig into the insulation and reduce its R value. A perfect system would be the use of these insulated, basically they're mechanical insulated inserts that allow you to clamp down. They're rigid as opposed to this that's soft, and that allows you to clamp down without destroying the R value of the insulation, and then you seal. So as I said earlier in my text on the video, I haven't detailed any of the interfaces between insulation pieces and valves and stuff. I wanted to keep that open so that we could do our pressure test, make sure that there wasn't any leaks. And in my thinking, my poor thinking, I thought that the inspector would just be able to pull back the insulation and verify any joints that he had a concern about. But of course, there's hundreds of joints here. He's not going to take that kind of trouble to do. So it just became my issue. So I don't know what to say. This is how to do it if you want to ensure it's a nice, airtight, well-insulated job, but it breaks code and it upsets the inspectors. So obviously you have to do it the hard way, which I really don't have time to do, but on a commercial job, you'd have to do. So once we had gone through that issue, and I had finished trying to run around and fix the raise the pressure for the test pressure, and was just shadowing him so he could tell me what I had done wrong. We came over to, and again, this part of the video was taped quite a bit after the initial part, so things are going to look different here than the beginning of the video. This is a week and a bit after, so I have been working. Came over and looked at these white pipes that you see here. Now they are something that I installed way back when I was doing the rough-in plumbing below the concrete floor slab. They're PEX B pipes that go to each trap, and the idea is that you put a little bit of water down them on an infrequent basis so that you keep the traps full of water so that you don't have sewer gases entering the home. Now the problem is, when these were originally planned, and they go up and they go over and then they go to a central spot that is over here that has the distribution hub, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. But they go to 4 different traps in the basement, one of them being right below here that you can see. When I first designed these, the concept was that I was going to have a takeoff off the shower in the master bedroom. That would, every time the master bedroom shower was used, they would dump a little bit of water into the system and put it into the traps. Partway through the build, once I got the cistern, the groundwater cistern in place, I suggested to the inspector that it probably would make a good idea to switch the system to non-potable water, so we're not wasting potable water just to keep traps primed. And he thought that was a great idea. The problem is, in my mind, I hadn't switched the service of these pipes. So instead of them being potable, now they're non-potable. They have a new set of rules. For the rest of my non-potable, I used purple pipe, which is in the industry designates that it's a non-potable water. And you can sort of see some little stubs of it there coming out. Oops. Sorry, I'm going to just put you on hold here for a sec. So as I was saying, the purple pipe designates that it's non-potable, and I used a purple PEX A Uponor pipe for most of my non-potable system. Certainly everything that goes from the cistern to like the toilets and the roofs and all that kind of stuff. It was just the initial stuff that I had done literally years before I had put the cistern in place that I had used the PEX A white pipe. So I hadn't made that switch over in my mind, and so I hadn't thought about the labeling requirements. And if you don't use purple pipe, you have to mark the pipe every 24 inches to indicate that it's non-potable water. And of course I had not done that. So I had to go through after the fact and go and every 24 inches, regardless of where it is, all the way through the system. You can see some of it there. I had to go and put these stickers on. I should also at this point admit that my concept of using this is a trap priming distribution hub. So it takes a single source and converts it to 4 lines to 4 different traps. And because of the fact that the piping was coming out of the floor assembly, and because my floor assembly wasn't that deep, I had tried to install in this orientation, which in a previous video I admitted was a poor poor option, but I thought it could work, and I was stepping down the pressure so that I didn't have to worry about any issues. I was not able to make this stop leaking, and as I'll show you, it's definitely not a pressure device. It is definitely only a gravity device. And so there wasn't really a safe way to install this upside down. Kind of a homeowner bungling. But and I'm upset because that was a lot of work to try to figure out how to get the copper on there so that I could still crimp to the white pecs, which obviously you can't do when it's in place. So I needed these compression furls. So it was a lot of getting various materials, but in the end I abandoned it because I was just chasing a rabbit down a hole. And I went instead to a copper manifold, which I should have done at the very beginning. As you can see here, this is going to be a lot more durable situation. Just a copper manifold fed from the cistern. Basically, the cistern has a pressure regulator within its pump, within the tank itself, so that it senses if the pressure in the pipe goes down, the pump goes on. So anytime that you open a tap anywhere in the system, the pump turns on because it senses that pressure drop. So what I've done here is I have put in a pressure reducer just because I don't need that much water going to the traps. I didn't want it spewing out. And then this is a 24 volt solenoid. So I'll basically connect this to the home sear automation system, and I'll have it set to turn on once a month, once every 6 weeks, for probably no more than a minute, maybe even 30 seconds. And that'll be all the water that is needed to keep the traps full. But again, you can see here all of the labeling. Every 24 inches you've got to do, unless you use the purple pipe, which you can see in the background. It was the source. Okay, so we got through talking about the labeling requirements. Sorry for the shaking here. The next thing that he showed me was the fact that, and I may as well show you some of it down here as well, I had not, I might not have much down here actually. Only thing that I did down here after was, you can see the red plates protecting the ABS from screw penetrations. Technically that was passed off on the initial inspection as not being required, but I did add it. But he was more concerned about where pipes were close to the surface of a stud or wall plate. And I had planned on doing this anyway, but I hadn't tied it to the inspection. And part of the reason is the code is fairly vague. The plumbing code just says you shall protect pipe from mechanical damage. It doesn't provide any guidance. The electrical code says you shall protect from mechanical damage by not having a pipe or a wire closer than 1.25 inches to the surface of a stud, framing member, anything. And if you do, you have to put a protection plate over it. So I had planned on doing this on the plumbing anyway, and I had actually even started it, but I didn't have it on everything. And so he called that out because it needed to be done. And so I had to go through and add this kind of thing where the pipe's closer, you're worried about a screw going in and damaging it, which makes total sense. And as I said, I also did the, in a lot of places, I did the ABS main drains as well. Here I've notched out the bottom plate to fit the thickness of the protection plate so that there isn't a bulge in the drywall. But I had to go through and clean that up in a number of locations. Some of them were here that he was looking at. He was looking at this ABS here wasn't done, and I think there was yes, some up in that area there, that kind of thing. So that was the last of the three items that he was concerned about, that he was actually going to make me address. As I said, he was kind. He didn't make me rip out all of the insulation. And in fact, because this video was taped a week or so after the beginning of this, I have actually finished all of that work. He has come back and passed off the system. So I marked all of the white PEX. I was able to raise the water pressure to 140 for the inspection, and I had all of the protection plates in place. Now at the time I also had him inspect on the second inspection, I had him also inspect the shower, rough-ins, and tubs. So let's go have a look at those. So the last time you saw this shower, I was just in the early throes of roughing it in. So it's now done, it's passed off. The actual shower waterproofing has not been passed. I'm not going to finish this bathroom until after occupancy, so I'm going to need to do my waterproofing at a separate time. But he has passed off the piping itself. And so now you can see why I wanted the soft copper and the pipe bender to try to 45 all of these pipes so that they passed over one another would have been quite challenging. And also to try to get, for instance, that large 3/4 elbowed in so that it met up with the piping there. These are all proud of the wall by a lot more than normal, and that is because I will be insulating this wall assembly and putting in some hydronic heating pipes so that the wall radiates heat towards you in the wintertime. And so just to go through this, and also I had talked earlier about the long radius. So you can see here this, for instance, this 90 has a much better flow than if this just came straight over and down. And you can visit my video talking about the HRV ducting, where I talk about the long radius elbows I got there. Now, will it make a huge difference in a 3/4 inch line? Probably noticeable, but probably not critical. But it's such an easy thing to do, why not do it? So I've got a long radius here, and I've got a long radius here. And it was a bit challenging to fit all of these lines into this space. But again, to review, this turns on the water to the shower head, and then we just go up a 3/4 line to the selector valve that selects whether or not it's going to be a rain shower or a waterfall shower or both, and then goes up to the actual rough-in for the shower head. And I actually had to contact the manufacturer to get 2 more of these nipples that didn't have a hole down the center. These 2 have a hole down the center for actual use to feed the 2 different heads. And I'm not sure, I guess they have different style of shower heads that might have a 3rd use, but they had included this what I call blind, but they hadn't included these blinds, so there was actually no way to pressure test the system. So I had them send me out those 2, because the threading that's on these is quite unique, and I could not find a standard fitting that would fit it. So we come out from the selector valve here, we come out to the 2 locations, and they will then feed one or the other of these heads. So I guess there has to be somewhere in here, there has to be a block off so that it's not going through. And to be honest with you, I don't know how that, what the internals look like, but it should work. We've got our temperature select, so this doesn't set pressure at all, it just selects the temperature, and it's an automated system so that if you set this, I don't know, to say 100 Fahrenheit, and the water coming in the hot pipe is 100, it will completely stop the cold supply. If this is 110, it will allow enough cold to come in so that this reaches back to 100. So it's similar to the mixing valve off the hot water tank I talked about earlier. And in fact, when I was pressure testing this, and I turned off the curb stop for the hot water, no water came out at all, because even on the minimum setting, obviously cold water wasn't going to meet that, so it wasn't allowing any cold water in, which was interesting. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not the drain heat water recovery system heats up the cold water enough to allow it to flow in under the minimal temperature settings. Then we've got our body jets, volume valve, and you can see we've got two pressure balancing systems. So on body jets, you want to try to have all 4 or 6 or whatever number you have jets with the same pressure going to them. So that's why you have pipes coming in and out of each body jet, so that you can feed it from 2 locations or feed through that location. And in this case, I've got my feed coming down. It itself is going to 2 locations. And then if we look at the back side of this, you can see that I've got another balancing loop here between the 2 sets of body jets. I've got a cross loop here. So, and then at the top we've got just a loop over that goes over to that one. So this should ensure that we've got equal pressure coming to each body jet. And this Moen hardware is really nice quality stuff, and easy to use and easy to adjust depth and that kind of thing. And then finally we've got a volume valve for what will be a hose, a handheld wand. Right now we're using it as a hose fitting so that we can fill up, for instance, our tubs. So the tubs are installed, they're tested. We didn't test them on the first inspection because the way that the district system works, and I didn't know this until after the first inspection, you have to book a single task inspection, completely get out of the system, and then book the next task inspection, and then the next, and then the next. The system isn't set up to book multiple tests, inspections at the same time, which is kind of bizarre, and it doesn't actually tell you that anywhere. So I just assumed if I had them coming out that they would look at everything that was ready, because it didn't allow me to select more than one item. Anyway, I'm glad we didn't inspect on the first inspection, because when I looked the day after the inspection and let the water out of the tub, we actually had a leak down underneath where the drain is. And I was quite flummoxed because I had, when I first installed the tub, left the tub full for a good week without any problems. But because the tub had been sitting vacant or empty for, I guess, a couple months now, and no water at all, I suspect what happened is the putty, the plumber's putty that I had installed between this drain and the tub body itself. I had installed plumber's putty per the manufacturer's recommendations, which I absolutely hate the stuff. I've never found that it's had a long-term success rate of stopping leaks. I suspect that it had dried out and shrunk a little bit, and so I ripped it all out and just removed the drain, cleaned off all of the putty, and then used silicone for the interface between here and the tub. Funny enough, the manufacturer had recommended silicone on the underside and to the overflow, but they had recommended putty here. The other tub manufacturer had recommended silicone here as well. So now we've got silicone, it's done, and it passed the inspection. I also was taught a long time ago, and I actually don't remember who gave me this information, that you should always bed your tubs in concrete. And this was actually a recommendation by this manufacturer. It provides a lot more durability for the tub. It's not flexing as you stand in and get out of it. It feels better. It's also a thermal mass. So it is going to provide an extended heat capacity of the filled tub. And now that's not necessarily going to be as much of a problem, because this is going to be lovely with the heated bask on this tub, and that's what the controls there you see. You can have high or low heat on the bask, or completely off if that's your desire. But it's going to be nice and comfortable. And then we've got our I guess they're called Roman style faucets. So this will be the temperature and volume. The actual spout will come out here, and then we've got a if I can get it out here, we've got the there we go. We've got the handheld one. This, because there's a shower in this room, this will not have a shower facility on this tub. Partly because I wanted this lovely interface here, which is for the built-in TV. And then finally we've got our towel rack. I think I had talked a little bit earlier, maybe I didn't, about the fact that when I actually got this bathroom in place, we realized we don't really have a spot for towels. The double vanity goes here, so there's not really a spot on either side of here. And then we've got the doorway to the toilet room, and then we've got a linen closet here, and obviously you can't put it over the doorway here. And then we've got the tub, and then we've got the doorway. So this is going to provide a nice, easy spot to put them. And then of course, because it's heated, they're going to dry nicely. So it's going to be awesome. And I just haven't quite finished installing the backer boards, the plywood backer boards. The other tub got the same treatment and was passed off. It's been mounted or installed on a base of concrete. Again, it makes it a lot more stable and secure. And then just a shower tub combo here, as you can see. And the hoses, again, just to allow us to fill up the tub for testing. And the reason you fill up the tubs for inspection, they want to see whether or not there's a leak to the drain as the water's sitting in it, but it also allows the inspector to open up the drain with a tub full of water and go to the floor below and look for any leaks in the trap and the trap arm and that kind of thing. Now, just on a side note, while we're at a shower, I want to talk about just a quick comment about the inspector's original recommendation for trap primer. There is commercial trap primers out there. and they work on a pressure drop. They're installed typically near the hot water tank somewhere, and the theory is that they sense a pressure drop in the system every time a tap is used, and they inject a small amount of water into the trap priming water line. They hardly ever work reliably. In my days as a home inspector, I saw many traps that were dry and there was trap primers installed and they weren't functioning, and the home inspector also confirmed this. So his recommendation was pretend this is the master shower, and he wants the master shower because that's almost ensured to be used on a regular basis. The pipe between the shutoff and the shower head is always copper. That's a code requirement. So what he pretends this is a copper T. He recommends you put in a T into the line, and then you've got these stub outs, I think they're called, where they're the rough in stub outs. Let's see if you can see that, where it's got it's a turned end on the end, on the turned cap on the end of the pipe, so that you can do your pressure test. And then later on, you just cut this off and you install your faucet connection. And you end up with a whole bunch of these cutoffs. And so what he recommends you do is you take the smallest drill bit you can find, and let's see if I can get this in the sun for you. Smallest drill bit you can find, and drill into the very tip of that stub out end. And then you install it, and I'm going to try to put you down here again. Bear with me a sec here, see if this works. You install it this way into the T, and then you just solder on your copper or whatever connection to a PEX pipe onto this side. And so every time water comes up the pipe to the shower head, a tiny little bit of water is spewing out that small hole. And you need to make that hole as small as possible. You'd be shocked at how much water comes out of even a 2/32 hole when it's under 60 pounds of pressure, 50 pounds of pressure. So that was his recommended fail-safe way. You're never going to have it get clogged up. It's always going to be pumping out water every time the shower is used, and I thought it was quite ingenious. It's not necessarily code, but it's inspector recommended. Well, there you have it. Not only was I in hot water with the inspector, but because of electrical progress, I might actually have some hot water soon on the job site. I have now wired up the hot water Rheem hot water tank, hybrid tank. As you can see here, I've got armored cable, which is a requirement by code when connecting to the hot water tank. And technically it might not have been on this case because the hot water tank was high enough that it's above the, I believe it's 50 inches that you've got to be for protection, which is why you see the little bit of protection conduit there. But I think just because of earthquake requirements, it's still a requirement to have armored cable to the tank. And this is one of the ways that the manufacturer and code allow you staple the armor to the wall, and then you staple the cable to the wall just above the armor. And in my case, I've got the cable going across the ceiling and attached. That will then later on be covered over by insulation. It's also above the 50-inch mark, so there's no requirement for mechanical protection, and that goes to the new panel. And what I'm going to look at doing with the new panel, once I've finished getting all the circuits wired in, I might, and I've started the process, I've got just a 60 amp cable coming over, and I will bring it to a temporary breaker in this temporary panel and move all of the official circuits. So I've got two plug circuits for the garage workbench, and then I've got this one here is the 30 amp for the groundwater sump pump. I'll move those over to the panel to their permanent locations, and then I'll just energize a few specific circuits so that A, I can get the hot water tank going, B, I can get a few plugs going throughout the house and get rid of this mirage of or tangled web of extension cords that I've been living off of for the last 6 years. Some of these cords have been in service. So thanks for visiting. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you do enjoy the video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. And if you don't want to miss any extra commentary that I put on my building website blog, you can subscribe there as well so that you get email updates every time I do a new blog entry. It's not that often. I should be doing it every couple of weeks. I'm probably doing it about once a month, and the vast majority of it now is based on these videos, but I do provide extra photos and extra commentary at times on the journal. Thanks for visiting. Stay healthy, stay safe during these difficult times, and we'll see you again soon.